Tendai Mwadi, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai Muzimu Mukuru, give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodi, African liberation and African power for all African people. For those who are not aware, my name is Shaka, and we're here, you know what I'm saying, representing at the Our Corner section of Speaker's Corner, representing for Titans TV, and I want to give thanks to the brother for putting on and gathering us for this initiative. And whilst I'm here, you know, I'm just minded that it's the first time I've been here for a while to speak, and our good brother Isa, who passed away a few years ago, is not here. And so I want to begin, just by honoring our good brother, because he shared the circle with us many, many times, And so in the Yoruba language, we would say Mojuba, Mojuba. We pay homage to our brother Isa, and we give thanks for his life, and the time that he spent with us in this space. And I'm going to speak on a subject that I know he'd have many disagreements with me on, but I love the brother same way. And we had many disagreements, but we also always reasoned, in the spirit of love and in the spirit of respect. And so when I speak today, I speak with that spirit and extend that spirit of love and respect to all brothers and sisters who are listening. And so it's Titans TV, and I know the brothers and sisters are very, very interested in issues to do with spirituality and religion. And so I'm going to do a brief breakdown of African spirituality as a political imperative, And when we say this, when we say political imperative now, we're referring to specifically in the realms of Pan-African political development. And many brothers and sisters often wonder why people who are politically Pan-African have such an embrace and an affirmation of indigenous African spiritual systems as they manifest and develop on the continent of Africa, as well as in the African diaspora throughout the Americas and the Caribbean. And so I hope to give that understanding today. But let's just define some terms first and foremost. When we say African, we're referring to the indigenous people of the African continent. I know we can have some discussions around that, but we'll do that another day. Spirituality is a way of life steeped in reverence to a divine creation and divine inner cultivation of the self. And when we talk about politics, we're talking about people organization, self-governance, and self-determination. And so when we look at African spirituality, we can only understand what is referred to as African spirituality, which I prefer to refer to as Kimoyo, but that's another conversation for another time. We can only understand the indigenous spiritual systems of African people within the context of African culture. And if we understand what culture is the natural and complete way of life of a people. The natural and complete way of life of a people, which means that culture informs how we organize politically. Culture informs how we organize economically. Culture informs how we organize socially. And so when we look at all of these dimensions, we begin to have a window into how African spirituality relates to our political and economic development. So I self-define as an African spiritualist, and this is imperative for us, especially those of us coming out of the African diaspora experience. My family, one side is from Jamaica, the other side is from Antigua. And we have a history of preserving, under the conditions of enslavement, colonization, and neo-colonization, we have a tradition of preserving our indigenous African spiritual systems as a means of resistance against the enslaver and the colonizer. And I'll give you a few examples, For many brothers and sisters may have heard of the Kumina tradition, in Jamaica, centralized in St. Thomas in Jamaica, in the eastern side of Jamaica. Well, many people don't understand that the Kumina tradition is the preservation of the Bakongo nationhood within Jamaica, And this is important because Kumina and related systems become known as Obia, in the Jamaican context. And the reason why they become known as Obia is because in 1776, there was a man by the name of Chief Taki, who was born on the continent of Africa in the region that we now know as Ghana. And he was enslaved. He is actually considered to be royalty on the continent. He was enslaved and brought to Jamaica and leads an anti-slavery rebellion in 1760, in the year 1760 in Jamaica. And because of the fact that the rebellion was organized through a system of priests and priestesses using the English terminology, yes, the colonizer referred to what the spiritual system that these people were practicing as Obia. And there, from that time till now, there has been an anti-Obia law, a law against the practice of Obia in Jamaica that still exists today from 1760, yeah? And so when we look at this reality, we will see that there is a connection between African spirituality and resistance and African spirituality and people organization. So let's get to the major aspect of the topic now. When we look at culture, there are three dimensions of culture that I want to elucidate today. The one is ontology. The second is cosmology. And the third is axiology. Ontology. What is ontology? Big English word. Simply means how you understand and identify the nature of the self. Yes? Cosmology. What we understand and how we understand and appreciate the nature of the universe, the cosmos. Axiology. The primary principles and values that we derive from how we see our nature ourselves and how we see the nature of the cosmos and our place in it. All of these elements represent a culture, and from these elements is derived your politics, your economics, your social system, etc., etc., etc. Yeah? So when we look at these dynamics, we will see that there is an axiology, a cosmology, and an ontology that is specific, that informs what it means to be an African and what it means to be free and liberated as an African. When colonizers and invaders came, yes, to us and among us, one of the first things that they did was to demonize our spiritual systems and our spiritual institutions, because they understood the role that they played in organizing our communities, our nations, and our civilizations. Yeah? And so African spirituality as a political imperative teaches us that in order for us to achieve the necessary unity that we need to be able to organize among ourselves, self-determine, and throw off the shackles of neocolonialism in this age, we need to fix and mend our ontology as African people, which means we need a framework for us to see our connectedness with each other as a people, and that connectedness is best found in our indigenous cultures. Yeah? Why do I say that? All spiritual systems honor ancestors. All spiritual systems honor the ancestors that are unique to that spiritual system. There is no spiritual system that doesn't honor a group or a particular ancestor. And so we see that in order for us to redevelop and define an African ontology, we need to reconnect to our African ancestors. Yes? And African spirituality provides us a framework, not just to reconnect to our individual ancestors, but to be able to see the connectedness from our individual ancestors to other African ancestors. There is no conflict from one being a Yoruba to one being Fon. There is no conflict from one being Fon to one being Zulu. There is no conflict from one being Zulu to one being Indebele. There is no conflict from one being Indebele to one being Kikuyu. There is no conflict from one being Kikuyu to one being Osa, yeah, for example, okay? And so it's imperative, yes, it's imperative that we understand the African ontology, the African cosmology, because when we look at this concept called the cultural unity of Black Africa, given to us by Baba Sheikh Anthony, we will recognize that there is a shared foundational essence to Africa, what makes up the complex of African cosmologies. Notice, I didn't say that all African cosmologies are the same. There is a difference. I said there is a shared essence to what makes up the complex of African cosmologies. And from that foundation, we see a basis through which to forge political, economic, and social unity in this day and age. And I'll end on this point because I'm sure I've either gone over or fast approaching the 10-minute mark. There was a great Pan-Africanist by the name of Amilcar Cabral, and he has a speech called National Liberation and Culture. And he says that to oppress a people I'm paraphrasing, is fundamentally to destroy their cultural production. Yes? What that means is you can only really conquer a people if you destroy their culture in terms of how they produce materially and socially for their people. He also emphasizes the fact that in order to completely suppress the resistance element among that people, you must kill the culture, because if any element of the culture remains, the people find an organizational framework through which to rise up, to reorganize and reassert themselves within their own power. Yes? And so because of this and all of these dynamics, from a Pan-African point of view, there is no liberation for African people without a restoration of dignity of African spirituality and culture. There is no liberation and freedom for African people without the capacity to freely affirm and build and produce from an African spiritual and cultural framework, cosmology, axiology, and ontology. And this is actually our divine experience as Africans who were enslaved in the Caribbean. Because if we look at the tradition, what is called voodoo in Haiti, we will understand that voodoo is not the evolution of one individual people group, but it is in fact the evolution of many different African people groups recognizing the shared ontology, cosmology and axiology within their spiritual systems and evolving something new. When we look at the Lukumi traditions in Cuba, we will recognize that we have Yoruba tradition within, we have the Congo tradition within, we have Fon tradition within. And when we look at all of those elements, that's what you call Pan-Africanism. Yes, that is what you call Pan-Africanism, kings and queens, in a very, very basic aspect. I'm just touching the subject right about now to inspire some more conversation, discussion, and debate around the subject matter. I conclude as I open. Tendai Mwari, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai Muzimu Mukulu, give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodiye, African liberation and African power for all African people. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.